It's past 9 a.m. as we continue with the show this morning. We stay in the company of our Salam Media listeners this morning and also listeners from One Nation 88.9 FM joining us out of Polokwane. We welcome you to the show. We still have got a lot to talk about. Now, one issue in Africa has been surrounding Mali, which has given the French ambassador 72 hours notice on Monday to leave the country. And this came after hostile and outrageous comments by the former colonial power about its transitional government. And we joined on the line this morning by the Institute for Security Studies, Ornella Moderan. Ornella, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Yes, now clearly the statement by the French ambassador has not gone down well in Mali, and we're now seeing this drastic action on the part of Mali expelling the French envoy.
So the contested statement actually did not come from the French ambassador himself. They came from the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the one hand, and from the French Ministry of Defense as well on the other hand. So the the Malian authorities' move to remove the French ambassador is a form of diplomatic protestation against an attitude that the French authorities from Paris has been having. So it's not it's not personal against the ambassador. This is part of a diplomatic misunderstanding and quarrel that has been going on for months between the two countries.
Yes. Now, clearly, France and with the history of colonization, and clearly, the we could see that the tensions obviously were there. We've seen these escalating tensions between Mali and France, and also, we know the history of Mali. There have been
Mhm.
coups and all sorts of things as well. So clearly, the timing of this thing here, Onella, hasn't been good, and this is the reason why the Malian government has taken this drastic step and condemned it in the most strongest terms possible.
So again, I think we should put things in perspective a little bit. So the Malian authorities' decision to expel the French ambassador um, is very impressive and symbolic from a diplomatic perspective, but it does not amount to a breaking of the relationship with France. France itself, in fact, has merely taken note of this, which is one of the various elements that diplomats have in their toolbox to protest when they disagree. So this is a very, it makes a big impression from a mediatic point of view, but this does not mean that the relationship between the two countries are broken. The other element, I think, is that we shouldn't underestimate the impact that the French authorities' comments have had on public opinion and on the image of the Malian government. They have used quite some strong words talking about irresponsibility and illegitimacy of the transition of authorities. While this is related to the nature of an exceptional regime like the one we have right now in Mali, it also comes at sorry excuse me, it also comes at a time when there is an uprise of the national sovereignty feeling in Mali. So, of course, this is not accepted by most Malians who tend to support the decision that their governments have made as one of national sovereignty.
Yes. Now, also, I think one needs to understand and look at it from from the military government, and also trying to understand as to what led to the statement saying that the Mali government or the military government is out of control. Because we know that France, obviously being one of the colonizers, like many we've seen in Africa, but they still maintain some interest in Africa even after they have basically left the continent.
So yes, there is this colonial history that plays a significant role in the relationship that Mali and other West African countries and Francophone African countries have with France. But beyond that, I think much more immediate kind of elements have to do with the decade-long presence now of France on Malian soil, conducting a counterterrorism operation, which initially had some success, um, but has not really been able to curb the insecurity that either Mali or the broader Sahel are facing. So, on top of this perception of arrogance from the part of France, there's also the kind of public exasperation about what's perceived as a military presence that's been inefficient, and which, on top of that, has come with some level of arrogance from France. As you mentioned, the comment that particularly shocked public opinion here, I think, is the one about being out of control. Well, the question is, out of whose control? Is this somehow a a recognition and admission that France expects to have control on Malian authorities? This is something that has shocked people quite substantially here.
Well, certainly, and also I think as you correctly pointed out with regard to the history, and it is clear that when one looks at the intentions of the colonizing countries, these come under the radar. They are being questioned as to what do they still want, and also at the same time we've seen military presence, and at this point in time, France saying that. Their troops would not stay in Mali if the price was too high. So there seems to be a lot of suspicion in that respect as well, Ornella.
So, about the French military presence in Mali and in the Sahel more broadly, one thing to keep in mind, I think, is that it was initially based on a Malian request I mean, it was a direct request from the Malian transitional government that was at power in 2013. Now, initially, there was a lot of public support for this because Mali was indeed in need of external support, and France was present to provide that in a very successful way for the first year. Now, as the years have gone by and the situation has increasingly complexified, and the French military intervention alone has not been enough to curb a growing insecurity, nor have other types of national or international interventions, by the way. Well, there has been a rise. As I was mentioning, in just general exasperation from the people. There is this notion that, it's very difficult to understand how comes that there are just so many boots on the ground and still the situation keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So the positive political capital and public support that France initially enjoyed within the framework of this crisis as being a sort of external savior coming in at the request of the Malians has evolved negatively over the years, and right now there is stronger and stronger protest against what is eventually perceived as a sort of new colonial, perhaps somehow interested French military presence that's also uh, reasonably ineffective in the region. So, yes, there are a number of elements at play.
Yes, and amongst those elements, obviously, are economic interests. And we know that many of the European countries and the colonizing countries have had huge economic interests in Africa, in looking at, and we're not only talking about Mali, but we're also talking about other parts of Africa in terms of resources, and a huge economic interest to obviously get their hands on some of the resources on the African continent. So one cannot discount that element as well amongst the many other issues that you have been talking about, Ornella.
So Again, I think we should look at things from a very national and context specific perspective. I will not talk about other African contexts where such economic interests might be at play, and they're definitely awesome. Looking at the specific case of Mali, however, um, there is no indication that this would be a driving force. So, yes, it's part of the general narrative that's being pushed to discredit the French presence. But looking at the official figures we have, and without any form of naivety, there also has been an extremely important investment from European Union, from the French government, and from other European governments into providing development support, military assistance, military training support, and things like that over the years. So, I've been working in this region and researching this crisis for the past at least four, in fact, probably closer to 8 years now, and I am yet to see any evidence that the driving force behind the French intervention is economic interest. There definitely are some interests, at least political interests, in the sense that the Sahel is perceived by European countries as a sort of external frontier for them, somewhere where they should stop whatever threats before those threats actually get to their own borders. That definitely is something. There are political interests related to illegal migrations, to the risk of spreading terrorism from the Sahel towards Europe, although that's something that has never really materialized until now. So there are those risks, but I think we should really be careful not to overplay the general and now age-old narrative about everything being, relying on unstated economic interests.
Yes, I think just finally, the key issue here is how does one actually find a balance in these relationships that, like, for example, a country like France would enjoy with a country like Mali?
That's a great question to end on. And I think a couple of elements of answers I could provide are, on the one hand, respect, and on the second hand, pragmatism. The way forward, I think, in restoring a healthier relationship between the two countries will have to include mutual respect, because this has been the stepping stone. This has been the main obstacle leading to this increase. So, the verbal attacks would need to decrease in order to restore normal diplomatic dialogue and negotiations as needed. That's the first thing, and that means, of course, coming down from what's perceived as pride on one hand and as arrogance on the other hand. The other element is some level of pragmatism. The French government, even in the midst of the current crisis, has reiterated its intention to remain in the Sahel and probably also in Mali to some extent. They have indicated that they will take 2 weeks to think about the renewal of their strategy in Mali. So we will wait and see what they come up with. But clearly, there is some level of pragmatism. Mali is in a process of extending its partnerships and increasing the collaboration with Russia, for instance, which is something that has been antagonizing Western European countries. But at the same time, again, pragmatism. It's not realistic for either party to expect that the other parties is simply going to disappear. So mutual respect and pragmatism could be two elements to move the relationship forward in a more balanced way.
Well, Ornella, thank you very much for that and taking time out talking to us this morning on News and Views on Salam Media. We wish you all the best.
It was a pleasure.
Ornella Moderan from the Institute of Security Studies, unpacking the issues surrounding France and the decision to expel the French ambassador out of Mali. The time is just gone 9:31 a.m. We come back, we'll be joined by co-founder of Restless Beings. We'll be talking with Mabrur Ahmed 1st anniversary of the Myanmar military coup.